Welcome back to the Bears Buddy podcast. This is your weekly update with Bears Buddy. We're going to get into the owners meeting as well as the stadium news. And lastly, we'll talk about the comp picks. This will be the last time that we talk about the comp picks. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Let's get into it. The owners meeting was in Phoenix this week, which is the one time a year all 32 teams get together before the draft. Coaches talk to the media, owners talk to the media, and Jay Glazer throws his annual coaches brunch where everybody hangs out. 28 of 32 coaches showed up to that brunch, and Ben Johnson was not one of them. But he did sit down with the reporters, and he came in self-critical, called out his own staff for not getting receivers open, confirmed Ozzy Trapilo is likely done for the season, and said he's basically starting from scratch relationship-wise with Kyler Gordon and Jaylon Johnson after both missed most of the year. So there's a lot from this owners meeting that I want to get into today. I think that the most important and obviously the best story for me is that Jay Glazer hosts this annual coaches brunch and only 28 of 32 coaches showed up. Ben Johnson not being one of them. I think the other, one of the other guys was like Sean McVay. I believe both LaFleurs were there, which just gives us that anti-Green Bay script as well. So want to hear your takes on this.
Yeah, so first of all, the first I've ever heard of it, I didn't know that Jay Glazer throws this party. It's not just a brunch. You call it a brunch. Brunch could be a bunch of old ladies sitting around at 11 a.m. eating Eggs Benedict, but it's a drinking fest, right? It's people are supposed to get sloshed at this thing.
Yeah.
Which
that's
true, right?
Say, Pat McAfee was like, I've got some stories that I can't tell you guys about.
That's first of all amazing. And, we're kind of still just getting to know Ben Johnson as fans of the Bears, but he strikes me as a guy who would be like, I don't have time for that sort of thing. I have too much homework to do. So that's fine. One way or the other, I would definitely be there. If there's any way that you and I, this is how we will gauge our success in this project. If we ever get invited to that event, we'll know we made it. But also, speaking of having a good time at the owners meeting, I just want to point out how funny I think it is that the combine is in fucking Indianapolis. They make the scouts go and have their national meeting basically in Indianapolis, and the owners and the coaches, they get to go to it's always someplace, Phoenix, San Diego, someplace warm. I'm sure they're having a great time. And yes, again, we should definitely go to cover that live next time. But I thought actually the thing that came out of that was most interesting to me was Ben Johnson's sort of calling out of the wide receiver coaching. And I don't know who's responsible for that. I know that they have a new offensive coordinator, so maybe that person is gone. But I thought it was surprisingly direct. You don't usually hear that from any head coach, and especially Ben Johnson, that they point to something specifically that they were unhappy about without taking full responsibility for it themselves. So I don't recall, out of in full transparency, the wide receivers coaches and whether it's the same guy. Maybe you know that. But is it?
Antoine Randall, there's JT Barrett, the QB coach. Press Taylor was the quality control or game day passing coach, and now he's the offensive coordinator. Before him, it was Declan Doyle. And then there's Ben Johnson, too. But yeah, I mean, great point, because I am like, who the hell is he talking about? Yeah. He's just like, he does make a clear distinction between defense and offense. And I think that's something that we're going to see change this year, is that he says us versus them almost. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's exactly what he says.
Yeah,
and
he's
so
the offensive guy.
Yes, 100%. So it all comes back to him. Again, this is where, Press Taylor, the new offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle, the previous offensive coordinator, the guys Monday through Saturday, this is what they do for a living. And again, it comes back to, I think it's Antoine Randall. He came from Detroit with Ben Johnson. Uh-huh. So is he the guy that we're blaming or what?
It has to be, right? You're talking about wide receiver coaching. And I also think it's very interesting. Again, I talked about this last week, and I'll keep going back to it. Ben Johnson gets everybody's benefit of the doubt right now for good reason. I get it, but if this was not Ben Johnson, if this was a different coach, if we still had Matt Eberflus in that position, and we heard that from him, I guarantee everybody would look at that and say, he's just covering for Caleb Williams. This is just a silly mind game that he's playing to try to coddle Caleb Williams, because Williams' passer efficiency rating, completion percentage is so low. And so we're going to do everything we can to distract from that and put the responsibility on somebody other than Caleb Williams. So, the problem is the receivers weren't getting open enough. And,
Right.
Again, under the current circumstances, I'm not trying to be overly cynical about it. I'm fine. I will just point out that if somebody else said that, we would have a very different opinion of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't even think about it that way. If Eberflus were to say that, I would say he's passing the buck. I would say that, like, you're the fucking offensive guy. Eberflus defensive, but if Ben Johnson was that type of Eberflus character, I would be saying, that's you, asshole.
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
Look, I know that, like, I know I'm going to draw everybody's ire, yours as well, just by mentioning Eberflus. So that was a mistake. I shouldn't have said Eberflus. If it was anybody else, if it was a new coach that they brought in, if it was Jim Harbaugh who they brought in instead of Ben Johnson, and they didn't have the year that they had last year, they went, 9-8, and we were just mediocre happy with the new coach, and there was still some honeymoon period. My point is, I think it's not hard to see that under a different light that this could really be more about Caleb Williams than it is about the receivers and the receiving coach.
And going back to that whole point, Ben Johnson saying that we're basically starting from scratch. No momentum carries over. That's bullshit. Because if he would have went 6-11, then we would have been like, hurry the fuck up. Like, you have one season left. That's it. There's a lot of momentum carrying over that he's just not saying. It's like he's not saying the quiet part out loud. That is, you just got allowance, bud. Like, you just got a huge leash here. And, obviously Chicago fans aren't going to let that go too long. If we come back and we are 8-9 this year, I think people will be pretty pissed.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, I think that's actually an interesting conversation too, just about expectations. Where are we with expectations? Because we know, obviously, success breeds expectations. Winning is sort of like the worst thing you can do for yourself in terms of setting expectations in the future if you're an NFL coach or basically anything in life, right? Any professional job you have. And so if they went, obviously 8-9 would be a catastrophe. Like 8-9, people will be freaking out. There are no excuses for 8-9. But if they don't take another step forward, if they make it to the playoffs again and lose in the first or second game, and they have roughly the same record that they had last year, I'm not so sure. I guess then it comes down to the details, because I'm not really sure how Bears fans would react. I mean, the team has been so bad for so long, and on the very rare occasion that the Bears have had some success, like they did under Nagy for a year, it's always so fleeting. It's so momentary, and there's never any kind of sustainability. If the Bears came back and did the same thing next year without any significant progress, I got to assume that people would be, I'm not saying they would be super excited about it, but I don't think anybody would be calling for Ben Johnson's head. And I think people would still be pretty satisfied. They'd be like, all right, we're moving in the right direction. Again, the details matter. It depends on how Williams plays more than anything.
Yeah.
But to your point, he's got a leash, right? Like, he's got a pretty long leash, provided he doesn't go backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, 10-7 isn't technically backwards. I know it is quite literally, technically backwards, but I feel like 10-7, like if we win the NFC North, whatever record we have, that's still up.
That's a good call.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So then the other big thing is that the Jaylon Johnson, Kyler Gordon, he just never got a relationship going with them. And it's an interesting point because so Luther Burden and Colston Loveland were both injured in the beginning of the season. They were in the building every day, and Ben Johnson was just like glowing about those two guys, that they're learning their books. And in the beginning of the season, he didn't rely on them at all. And I mean, Luther Burden had negative yards until that Cowboys game. But then as they go on, he trusts them more and more. It's completely different story with Kyler Gordon and Jaylon Johnson, where he doesn't like talk about them at all being in the building. And so I wonder, like, did these guys not even show up to the building? Like, how did he not know anything about them? Because again, Colston Loveland and Luther Burden, he was like, I'm so excited about these guys,
Yeah, I mean, let's also state the obvious that he drafted Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, right? So those are absolutely his guys. Now, it's unrealistic to think that everybody's going to be quote unquote his guy. I mean, he's obviously there were good players that were on the team before, Kyler Gordon and Jaylon Johnson being two very obvious examples. And as a head coach taking on a new job, obviously part of his job is to develop relationships with those guys and win those guys over. But the contrast between how he treats young, exciting talent that he picked versus guys that he didn't, maybe is not so unpredictable. And to the point, he also made the point, I think, when it came to those two guys, that they were injured most of the time. I know your point is, well, like, still weren't they around, and wouldn't he make it a priority to develop a relationship with them despite the fact that they're not playing? But I'm sure there's a huge difference between the type of contact that you have with a player when they're actually playing, when they're part of your plan every week and they're in practice, and than just a guy who's hanging around. How much time do you really have to devote to those guys, even if they're important?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I'm just curious to see what that looks like and if they're going to be traded midway through this season. I feel like what Poles is doing right now it feels like he's moving slow. They're completely changing the paradigm here. They want to go for faster players, and some of the guys that they picked up have the historically fastest times for defensive tackles. And so that's cool. They're really not spending too much, although by Adam Schefter's standard, we're broke. We've got about $1.5 million, and we have to free up cap space to afford the rookie class. So there is that's an unspoken thing that not a lot of people are talking about. We need to free up, I think it's about $14 million. So where is that going to come from? Maybe TJ Edwards contract. There's a couple of other things in there. Roshan Johnson, Noah Sewell, and then a couple of other guys. But the other thing too to think about is Ben Johnson basically put the nail in the coffin for Ozzy Trapilo this season. So it is like crunch time now. Another cool thing that came out was, let's see, Todd McShay said that 7 offensive tackles are going to come off the board in the first round. And now 2 quarterbacks are going to come off the board in the first round. So I am thinking best player available, is that going to be left tackle?
Well, no. So I saw your post on YouTube. My thought was completely the opposite, right? Like, if those offensive tackles are going to go early, then the value is in edge or defensive end.
Yeah.
Like, we
Yes.
know that's probably, all things being equal, where the Bears have the most glaring weakness and the biggest opportunity in the first round. To me, if I hear Schechter talk about how many offensive tackles are going to go in the first round, then how many of those guys are going to be off the board by the time the Bears pick late in the first round? And maybe some of those really great frontline defenders are going to get overlooked because there's a run on offensive tackles.
Right. And that like really is my hope. Okay. So moving on, the biggest story, I mean, there's a couple of big stories, but the biggest story I think coming out of this week was that the Bears didn't get their comp picks. So the Bears didn't get the comp picks The Bears developed Ian Cunningham from within. He got hired as GM of the Falcons, and under the Rooney Rule, they should have gotten 2 third-round picks for that. The NFL said no because Atlanta also hired Matt Ryan as president of football, and the league ruled Ryan is technically the primary football executive, making Cunningham's move a lateral one on paper. McCaskey, Warren, and Poles flew to New York, appealed directly to Goodell, and got denied anyway, even though Cunningham, Matt Ryan, and Arthur Blank all said publicly that Cunningham is the one running the show. So this is just like, I mean, this pisses me off because I've posted about this a few times and people, first of all, have told me to calm down about the situation, and I won't calm down about the situation. I've heard that like this ruins the spirit of the rule. There's just so much here. I mean, we could talk about this for an hour.
Yeah, well, let's start with the fact that you should be pissed because 2 third-round picks is a big deal. 2 third-round picks is actual capital. It means a lot, and the Bears did everything that they were supposed to do in order to receive that capital. So, as Bears fans, we have every reason to be pissed off. I think this finally closes the book on it this week for better. I won't say that's for better. It's for worse, but it's for better at least in the sense that we don't have to talk about it anymore after today. But like, yeah, it pisses me off a lot. If I were Arthur Blank, I'm telling anyone who will listen that Ian Cunningham is making all the decisions and doing everything from a football perspective. I would love to know, Matt Ryan, what am I paying you for? Like, what is your job? What, I don't like. Is he just really a figurehead? Like, does he just go around from VIP box to VIP box, thanking people for their contribution to the Atlanta Falcons? Like, what is that guy doing? Because maybe if he was really fulfilling some kind of purpose that we all understood, this would all make a lot more sense. But to your point, everyone is saying that Ian Cunningham is the guy who's running the show. So, which by the way, doesn't even matter anyway. What was Ian Cunningham's position? What was his title when he was with the Chicago Bears? It was not general manager, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Assistant GM.
So you're telling me that a move from assistant GM to GM that's not a promotion? That's the most blatant promotion I've ever heard of in my entire life. He was literally the assistant GM, and now he's the GM. So really, we could joke as much as we want about Matt Ryan, but it doesn't matter. Who cares how many people you have in your hierarchy? Like that, the point is, what was the job he was doing before, and what's the job he's doing now? And of course, again, you and I at this stage of this game are like the 100th and 101st person to be pissed off about this publicly and getting everybody riled up about it. And thankfully, and I would say, this was not always probably the case as Bears fans. I'm very happy to hear that the executive level, right up to McCaskey himself, were actually doing everything they could to get these 2 picks. As Bears fans, I think that's all we can really ask for. But I guess my final thought would be, it sucks. I don't understand the explanation. There's been a lot of people who have been going around trying to speculate as to why this might be. Might there be politics involved? If people are grasping at straws because it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, okay, here, let me put on my legal hat real quick. Here's how this works. People are saying,
legal hat. I think it's a very legal hat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So here we go. So here's how this works. People are saying that he's going from a number 2 to a number 2. Although Ian Cunningham hired an assistant GM. Ian Cunningham hired an assistant GM. So what? That guy's like number 5 on the totem pole in Atlanta? The Rooney Rule...
I don't want to interrupt you, but that's why can we only look at this? If you're so obsessed with the sort of hierarchy of where people stand, why are we only looking at it from the top? Why does everything have to be starting with the top and going down? So he went from a number 2 to a number 2. Maybe there's 100 people below him, and there were 95 people below him before. Why is that not just as relevant?
Yeah, and the other thing too is, why doesn't the NFL distinguish these roles. Like, if you're going to make up a fucking rule book and I could just circumvent the rule, which is what's happening here to me. I feel like Atlanta is just like, we're great guys. I swear we would never do anything that. Such bullshit. Okay, Arthur Blank is like an elite male in America, which is this NFL, the owners club. And he's going out there and saying, I would never do this. Bullshit. You are one of the most competitive people to ever exist in humanity. And you mean to tell me, my dumbass just sitting here watching the NFL, that I'm supposed to believe that shit? I don't believe it for a second. And like, to circumvent any rule, like, oh, Roger Goodell, you made a rule book. Very cute. Very cute. How about I just invent a new rule? Like,
to me, that that's our walk away with all of these decisions year after year. What do we always learn? It's that there are no rules, there is no judge, there's no jury, there's just Roger Goodell who wants to make whatever decision he wants to make. And almost always, if you want to try and break this down, and again, I don't think it's worth it in this case because we're all just grasping at straws, as I said. But if you want to figure it out, it's what are the owners? What's going to benefit the owners as a whole? That's what Roger Goodell works for the owners. He's going to try to come up with whatever he thinks is the best interest of the owners as a whole. I don't know how that fits here, but we do know that Roger Goodell just makes whatever decision he wants at any given time, and there's nobody who ever wants to hold him accountable for anything because the league is super successful. Everybody's making a ton of money, and nobody wants to fuck with it.
It's the best product ever outside of soccer. You know, like, it is like the most profitable. I'm addicted to the sport. I love the NFL. Like, I love football. David Stern is the best commissioner ever. Like, he grew a global brand there. You know, the Dream Team was an amazing thing. Roger Goodell had to fucking crawl. You know, like, David Stern crawled so Roger Goodell's dumbass could get dragged by the NFL, you know, like, so. But okay, the other thing too, real quick, before we get off this topic, the Rooney Rule comp pick is only triggered when a minority executive is hired into the NFL, officially calls the primary football executive role. Okay, meaning the single top decision maker in football operations for that franchise. But Kevin Warren was the one that fired Matt Eberflus. So Kevin Warren's above Ryan Poles. Mm-hmm. So he just got put into the Ryan Poles position again. It's like, that's what it was. So yeah, right. That's a football decision to fire Matt Eberflus, right?
Yeah. A very good one, by the way. One that we're all very thankful about. But yeah, it pisses me off. Look, well, and you know, and again, those 2 third-round picks, I think, would have made a big difference. And as we're sitting here talking about draft capital, as the draft's only a couple weeks away, only one of the third-round picks would be this year. But that changes your entire draft strategy. It changes the type of capital that you have to make moves. It's a real kick in the teeth. I guess if I were a Packer fan, I'd be happy about the situation. I'd be laughing the whole way.
For sure, I'd be so happy.
It doesn't seem objectively just to me.
That pick would have been the 101st pick in the NFL draft. Yeah. So, I mean, top 100 players, right outside the top 100 players, if you're going best player available. So, okay, last topic that we'll cover tonight is the stadium. The Bears have owned 326 acres of land in Arlington Heights, the old Arlington Park racetrack site, for over 3 years now, and they still haven't broken ground because Illinois can't get a property bill passed that would make the project financially viable. Every year they wait, construction costs go up $150 million. Indiana saw an opening, passed their own legislation in February to bring the Bears to Hammond, and now Illinois is in a full panic trying to get something done before they lose one of the most iconic franchises in NFL history across the state line. Warren went to Phoenix this week and basically had to say publicly that they're tired of waiting. No hard deadline, but he made clear a decision is coming this spring or summer. The Bears want to stay in Illinois, but Indiana is ready to go right now, and the clock is. So,
Yeah. So first of all, if I remember when Indiana passed whatever bills they had to pass. This was maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. This is when the story became very real that the Bears could move to Hammond, Indiana, because the state legislature in Indiana just like whipped through whatever bills they had to whip through in order to give the Bears everything they wanted to move to Hammond. And the governor of Indiana went on Chicago sports radio to basically gloat. Like there was no two ways about it. Like just gloat, and it became a very like red state versus blue state thing, which it often
yeah.
does in these cases. And at the time, like of course, he's the governor of Indiana. He sounds like a pretty smart guy, but it's amazing that he's not really taking into consideration at all that this could still be leverage. Like, I mean, everyone in Illinois, anyone who's paying attention to the story, recognizes that while it may not be impossible that they end up in Hammond, Indiana, for reasons that we all understand, that there's a very realistic possibility that this is the Bears using Hammond, Indiana as leverage to get the state of Illinois to give them what they want, because they already own the land in Arlington Heights. So not only would they prefer to stay in Illinois for historical reasons, because most of their fan base lives in Illinois, but also because they already own that land, and obviously that's their preferred place to build a stadium. What I don't understand is if I was the state of Indiana, I put all of this work in, and then I went around and bragged it to the whole world that, hey, we got the Bears coming to Indiana now. This is really happening. Why wouldn't they put a timeline on this deal with the Bears? We heard from Kevin Warren today that there's no timeline from the Bears' perspective, which is kind of crazy. And I don't think it's totally true, because there has to be some kind of timeline. And obviously, they're pushing the state of Illinois to get something done. Why didn't Indiana, when they passed that rule, when they passed that bill, why didn't they say to the state of Illinois, okay, here, we got all of our chips on the table. We're giving you this unbelievable sweetheart deal that you can't get from Illinois. You got to give us an answer in the next 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever is realistic, before Illinois has time to take their sweet time to come up with whatever they're going to come up with. I don't think the state of Indiana did that. And I think I'll never understand why. I think ultimately we're going to end up, my guess, is with a stadium deal in Arlington Heights, which, might I add, I live about 15 minutes from. And I would be very, very excited to have the Bears play within 15 minutes of my home. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people like me who never want to go to Soldier Field, because as much negativity as there is about this story, one thing that I think gets lost is how fucking awful it is to go try to watch football at Soldier Field. I know there's a lot of history there, obviously, and maybe this is like sacrilege to say, but going to a game from anywhere outside of the city of Chicago, and even if you're in the city of Chicago, going to a game at Soldier Field is fucking terrible. And the sooner that they can build a nice stadium somewhere outside of Soldier Field, that will be a great thing for Bears fans. Hammond, Indiana.
Yeah, nobody should have to go to Indiana. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I live in the city of Chicago. Have that. I love Chicago. I want it to stay on the lake. Like, that would be insane. I will say that they're, the Friends of the Park of Chicago, or whatever exactly it's called, piss me the fuck off. They are no friend of mine. Yeah, and I wish that, I wish a couple billionaires got together and threw some money at it, like just for naming rights at very least, and I know that they could do something like that, but it is a city-owned property, and that's where it really gets dicey. It also does get dicey that, yeah, like you said, like George McCaskey and the McCaskies own that plot. That's a lot of money. And by the way, every year construction costs go up. It's like also the value of that property goes up too. It's not just declining. You're not getting fucked on this deal. Do not get me started on billionaires.
But they're also paying tax and presumably interest.
Yep.
They borrowed to buy that land, so and it's just sitting there. I mean, they have a very nice billboard, nice digital billboard that talks about the Bears every time I pass it on the highway. But I doubt that that's getting them the ROI that they need in order to cover those costs. So
Yes,
that's
completely.
a mess for them. Um, Look, you bring up a good point, and I don't want to be too cynical about the Chicago Bears. In an ideal situation, even though I live 15 minutes from Arlington Heights, in an ideal situation, I would prefer they play in Chicago. They should be the Chicago Bears, but they should again. If we're just talking about attending a Bears game and the experience of that, they should not stay at Soldier Field. It would be ideal if they could find somewhere else in the city of Chicago so that they could maintain the true identity of the Chicago Bears. That would be awesome if they could find somewhere else to play. Buddy, I know you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but I will never understand why all of these sports franchises have to have their stadiums on water. It makes no sense. It is, first of all, you're taking up valuable land that could be used as waterfront land, whether it be condos or hotels. People like to live and stay in places where they can see the water. You sit in a stadium, you can't see the water anyway. What is the point of having that place on the water? You waste all of that lakefront land, and then eliminate half your parking because you can't park in the water, and you eliminate at least one direction to get to the stadium. So you have everybody trying to come to the stadium from entry. It makes no sense. Chicago's not the only place to do it. It's also true in Nashville and Cleveland. For whatever reason, any city that has water, they want to build a stadium on it. Do they have to get some kind of cargo from the water? They have to have cargo ships come in and deliver things? It makes no sense whatsoever. It will be much better when the Bears are not playing on the lakefront anymore. I know, again, that's like sacrilege because they've been doing it for over 100 years or something like that. It will be better when they're not playing on the lake. And just one other point about them being the Chicago Bears. Again, I would prefer they stay in the city of Chicago somehow. They're probably not going to stay in the city of Chicago. And what pisses me off most, and we talked about Roger Goodell already on this episode, the the NFL itself, owners, and Roger Goodell have the opportunity to step in and make a difference for fans in this case. Fans want the Chicago Bears to play in Chicago. Fans want the New York Giants to play in New York and the New York Jets to play in New York. And they want the San Francisco 49ers to play in San Francisco, I think. I don't know. I never talked to those fans, but I'm sure that's true. If they really gave a shit about the fans, they would step in and they would say to these owners, hey, look, you work out the best deal that you can work out. We'll support you in any way that you want. But if you leave the city that you are in, you can no longer call yourselves the Chicago Bears. You have to call yourself the Illinois Bears or the Arlington Heights Bears or the Hammond, Indiana Bears. The NFL could do that, but they have no interest in doing that because, again, they only care about the profitability for the owners and they don't care about the fans. And that sucks. I'm a capitalist. I get it. I know that the NFL makes a lot of money and nobody wants to fuck with that. But that is, as a Bears fan and as an NFL fan, that is unfortunate because they have the ability to actually step in and make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I completely agree. And yeah, look, I know that the Bears shouldn't be on the lakefront. And I mean, great point that the fans in the stadium can't see the lake. You can, by the way, you can if you have nosebleeds. Yes, you can.
If you're not looking at it, if you don't care.
You're not looking at it. So it is strictly for the fans at home that are watching on the game and see the lakefront. Although that's what they're going to do.
I've
That's
heard
what
this
ESPN
argument
does.
before. I asked ChatGPT. Why are they building these stadiums on the water? And that's what the primary answer was. So that, like, when the blimp shows you a view of the city with the stadium, that you can see the water. What, are you fucking serious? Like, you think that that's going to affect whether I tune in to watch the game or not because I see this picturesque view of the water? That's totally insane.
Yeah. I mean, Roger Goodell's statement is they need to find a solution for a stadium. They have looked not only in Indiana, but also in Illinois at other sites and invested in a site. I think they have been responsible in that fact. I think it's really important that they come to a resolution on this relatively soon. This is an important time to get this resolved sooner rather than later. Amazing quote. Amazing work, Roger. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for stepping in, you
So
idiot.
glad somebody asked him that. Yeah, and just one last point. I want to. I don't know. I bought tickets this year, right? You went to a couple Bears games, so so did I. I bought them secondhand, but somehow I still ended up on the Bears like email list, and they sent me a survey. Did you get their survey?
I did not. No, I haven't got any of these surveys.
They sent a survey. I want to say maybe this is 3 or 4 months ago, right around the time that that story about Hammond finally broke, and they asked me all these questions about like, would you still go to games if it was in Hammond, Indiana? So I told him to fuck off. Like every answer was as extreme as I could possibly put it, and there was actually an opportunity to say like in 3 words describe how you would feel if the Bears moved to Hammond, Indiana, and I only used one. How I feel, and I'll tell you, I will never go. Not saying never. Never is a strong word. I will not go to Bears games if they're in Hammond, Indiana, and that's not me standing on principle. That's because it would be a fucking impossible task for me to get to Hammond, Indiana on game day from the northwest suburbs or the northern suburbs.
Yeah,
But I'm not.
right.
I'm not alone. I mean, I'm sure the Chicago Bears know where most of their fans are, and especially the ones be too socioeconomic about this, but like the ones who can afford the exorbitant prices to go to Bears
Sure.
games are probably on the lakefront, moving north and northwest, and of course in the city. It makes of course, I understand that the state of Indiana is going to give them a lot of what they want, but from a purely business perspective, outside of that, it is clearly not in their best interest to move the team to Indiana.
Yeah, well said. Well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment. I want to know what you think about the Bears. I want to know what you think about this channel because whatever you think is what I'm going to morph this channel into. So we're going to be doing a lot of growing this year. This is a new part of the channel on my TikTok, on my YouTube. I really appreciate you. So stick around and I hope you follow the journey.